again. Welcome to Safe Space, where life questions are talked about from Christian perspectives. I'm Debbie. Thanks for being here with me. Welcome to this episode, where I speak to Dr. Hera Lukman on same-sex attraction. In the last segment, we talked about how important sexuality is in the sense of self, and that is what makes these struggles so perplexing. In this segment, we will talk about changing sexual attraction or orientation. Can it really happen? And how do we journey along with people facing these questions? Dr. Hera, welcome back for our final clip.
Hi, Debbie.
So earlier on, we talked about certain perhaps expectations that people should change, for example. But how real are these expectations? How flexible or inflexible is sexual orientation?
Right. Again, as the word sexual orientation is, full of different meanings to different people. So let me just clarify what we'll be talking about in this segment. When I refer to the word sexual orientation, I like to refer it as either sexual attraction or sexual identity. So when we talk about sexual attraction, it's a desire that we have, desire in terms of emotional attraction, or it's a sexual attraction. Yeah. So when that is what we're talking about, sexual attraction, research seems to indicate that it is rather flexible. In other words, we can be attracted to the same sex and the opposite sex, regardless whether we want to or not. Yeah, so
involuntary attraction.
Yes, we do have an involuntary attraction. Again, regardless whether that is, that we are aware of or not. So there were some studies showing that there are some physiological reaction when you look at a group of individuals who label themselves as heterosexuals. They do have reactions that would indicate attraction to the same sex. Having said that, when we talk about sexual identity, it's also flexible, but that flexibility is within a certain context. So a recent study was done, in a longitudinal study, looking at men and women, who label themselves as either heterosexual or non-heterosexual, and they look at their sexual identity through time. So what these researchers found is that the sexual identity is quite stable within a heterosexual group.
Right.
Okay. So among heterosexual, the sexual identity tend to be rather stable. However, in the non-heterosexual group, the flexibility is observed in females more than males. So in females, non-heterosexuals, they tend to have more what we will call a fluidity. So at one point, their sexual identity could be homosexual, right? At another time, they could be bisexual. So there is this fluidity, there is this possibility of flexibility of movement compared to non-heterosexual males who tend to be a little bit more stable compared to the female counterpart.
Okay.
Yeah. So in other words, I think what psychology is telling us, I remember us talking about psychology, and that it is a science and it tells us about human nature. So what psychology is doing or has done is showing us that it is possible for our sexual attraction and sexual identity to be flexible.
But many a times this is involuntary, meaning, I can't choose. Let's say, for example, I find myself in a situation where I'm attracted to someone of the same sex. It's kind of like involuntary, but maybe the sense is of a certain powerlessness that creates that trauma and shame. But I can't make myself like a different sex, right? in that sort of flexible inflexibility that we're talking about?
Right. I think, again, if we talk about sexual attraction, that is something more involuntary. So I can't stop myself from being attracted to the opposite sex, for example. Or someone with the same sex attraction cannot stop themselves voluntarily to be attracted or have a desire for the same sex. But what I can do is to choose to label myself in a certain way. So what I can choose is my sexual identity. I cannot choose my sexual attraction, so to speak. Yeah. So therefore, when we talk about sexual orientation that encompasses these two, we have to clarify which bit are we talking about.
Right.
And especially when we talk about in the context of change, which bit are we talking about? Change in sexual attraction or change in sexual identity, or both?
Yeah.
So I think people who talk about sexual change, people are not sure. Maybe they don't really talk about what change are they really looking at, particularly when we demand this change out of a certain moral reason, for example, or social reason. Okay, so we need to clarify, which bit of the sexual orientation are we looking at before we move on to the next question as to whether it is possible to change.
Right. So, if we were looking at what happened, what happened with Exodus International, the directors themselves, they claimed or they felt that they were ex-gay, and eventually they turned out, to be in compromising positions, and which led to the fall of Exodus International.
Yes, I think that was a really unfortunate situation. This, in my opinion, I think is because people have very different ideas of what that change is. So Mark Yahouse and his team and Stanton Jones, these two individuals in the US, did a lot of work in terms of looking at change in sexual orientation. And their longitudinal study has shown us that change, we need to define what we mean by change. And when we talk about sexual attraction, there is possibility of change, but the change may be in a very different way that we think change is, or we assume change to be. So let me tell you a little bit about their study first before I go back and give you my opinion about Exodus International.
Sure.
I think Mark Yahouse and Stanton Jones showed us that change is possible, but change in certain things. I think especially in when we talk about sexual attraction, what they found is that people tend not to be able to change sexual attraction that much. Yeah, when there is change happens to a minimal number of people, and the change is usually a reduction in same-sex attraction, rather than a change into opposite sex attraction.
Yeah.
So if you like, it's like a continuum of sexual attraction. So there can be changes in the amount of attraction that we have for another, okay? But it doesn't change our orientation, if you like, our attraction from same sex to the opposite sex, which is, I think, what some people would like to see.
I see.
So what the study is trying to tell us is that change is certainly possible, but not many people can change, can experience categorical change from same-sex attraction to opposite-sex attraction.
Yeah.
The changes that they found individuals in Exodus International was experiencing is change in the way they define themselves, for example. Like just now I talk about sexual identity, which is a choice. So they could change that labeling. So they label themselves as something else
Yeah.
from what they used to label themselves when they started out with the Exodus International program.
Sure.
You see. So what is important that Mark Yahouse and Stanton Jones was trying to say is that change is possible, but change is not for everybody, or change is not everybody's experience. When there is a change, there is less likely to be a categorical change. There is a reduction in sexual attraction to the same sex, but there is very little indication that individuals can change from having a same-sex attraction all the way to having opposite sex attraction.
I see.
So many of the participants in their study remain experiencing same-sex attraction.
Oh.
Remain having that attraction,
Okay.
but have changes in the way that they live their life. Either, you know, their sexual identity has changed,
Yeah.
or that their sexual attraction
Yeah.
to the same sex is handled differently.
Yes.
That change is possible. So I don't know whether, you know, you could
That
read
makes sense.
on his study.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that that is something that we need to understand, and that we need to have some clarification.
Sure.
As when we talk about change, what are we talking about?
Sure.
And when we talk about change, it's not necessarily for everybody.
Yeah.
You know, even though maybe someone we know, let's say, was able to change, quote unquote, it doesn't mean that another person that we walk with can change. So I think change shouldn't be the final outcome that we target.
Yeah.
It's this process of helping someone who is really wrestling with sexual identity issues to help them find meaning, to help them find community. I think that's the most important thing. It's not whether they can change to having from same-sex attraction all the way to opposite-sex attraction, as if that's the goal. I think if I were to ask individuals, you know, who's listening, can you change your own sexual attraction by just a click of my finger? I mean, can you do that? Can you now change your attraction from opposite sex to the same sex? I don't think that that is possible for many people as well.
Sure.
Okay.
What is your opinion on Exodus International?
I think Exodus International, again, you know, that there's a lot of expectation of the way that, you know, we live our life as Christians. And that, you know, that there's a lot of wrestling going on with individuals who find themselves having a conflict between their sexual attraction and their religious belief, you know, their sexual ethics. For these individuals, they have this, what I would call a cognitive dissonance. They have a huge dissonance, you know. On one hand, I believe in God's, the Christian sexual ethics. On the other hand, I'm experiencing same-sex attraction. How do I have a balance? How do I make sense of this? Yeah, how do I reconcile this conflict? And, you know, I think many people desire, in fact, you know, those who I come across who have same-sex attraction, their desire is not to have same-sex attraction. Their desire is to have opposite-sex attraction, and or not to have same-sex attraction as a problem.
Yeah.
You know, so they do a lot of things trying to reduce this so-called different experience that they have.
Sure.
While trying to do that, it's not easy changing if you're talking about sexual attraction, as we've seen from Mark Yahouse and Stanton Jones' research. It's not easy changing that, but there's also a lot of connotation when you cannot achieve that categorical change. There are social expectations, maybe, from their community, that God is able to help you change, you know, from what is intended sexuality, from what is non-intended sexuality to God-intended sexuality. When that doesn't happen, it has a lot of implication on who God is and who Christians are, you know. But unfortunately, for individuals who come out like Alan Chambers himself, indicating that he still has same-sex attraction, and that he admitted that there are a lot of things that's happening in Exodus International that forces individual to go through certain change activity that he deemed as something that he regretted, in his statement. I think all those are in the context of trying to achieve a life that is sanctioned by God, which is a good thing to start with, but when things don't work the way it is, then I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing all these repercussions of trying to do something that doesn't quite happen to everybody, and expecting everybody to change and to achieve a certain change.
How can the church and Christians provide a helpful, healthy presence for people in the process of figuring out their sexual identity?
Okay. I think I like to say that it's the same as anybody we are trying to walk alongside. Many times when when I think about walking alongside with someone who is wrestling with same-sex attraction or their sexual identity, I think of them as a person. I don't think about them as a person who has sexuality issue. I think of a person who is going through a journey of sanctification the same way that I'm actually going through my journey of sanctification. So I don't in a way label them with a certain issues that they are struggling with. So in a nutshell, when you come across, when we come across individuals who have struggles with their sexuality, it is actually good to remember that, what is it that they need from us? What they need is for us to live life with them, for us to, walk alongside them in their journey of sanctification, for us to have a sustained connection as their community. I think that's what they need.
Yeah.
So whatever that we do, if we could provide that, that would be the thing to do. I think more specifically, I think we need to listen more. There is a lot of things we do not know about individuals wrestling with this particular issue, right? And individuals whom I have come across, as a privilege, encounter. When I listen to their stories, there's a lot more that I don't know, and there's a lot of things that I think that we could do well just to listen and understand their perspective. So what I would do specifically is to give them that listening ear, okay, to walk with them, to help them wrestle with meaning of life, the meaning of why they are experiencing what they're experiencing. And as they lament on why God is putting them in such a situation, let us lament with them, let us listen and cry alongside them, because sometimes when people are talking, they hear themselves, right? And they hear themselves like no other situation. When they hear themselves, they know then they're processing their thoughts, and that is very helpful for them. So I would say listen, okay, as one very specific thing that we can do. Listen and be interested in them as a person. Listen and be interested in their story, and hold back that value judgment, hold back that morality issue that we are so, adamant to convey across, right? Hold that back until a time that is appropriate. So listen first. So I think that's the first thing that we can do. The second specific thing that we can do is not to treat the person as a project, something that we could fix. Nobody wants to be in that position. You don't want to be in a position to be fixed. So let's not put them in that position. Let's understand our role and understand God's role. Let's know that well. God is the potter, right? He's the person who would make the changes, who will make the transformation. You know, he's the one who will fix things, or he's the one who knows how to fix.
Yeah.
Not just them, but us. So we're all on the same page, really. And, you know, let's not treat them as somebody that we could fix. Let's treat them as somebody that is in the same place as us, who is in need of fixing. We all need fixing. So let's do what we do is in our role. Our role is to be with them in this journey of sanctification, in making sense of who they are, in making sense of who God is, and in making sense of who they can be in Christ. That they are not just their sexuality. They're so much more than that. If we can do that, if we can live with them, you know, live life with them, if we could be, you know, their companion in the journey of sanctification, if we could be their sustained community, I think in time we're able to wrestle things together, not just their issues, but my issue, you know, that they can be on the other side, that they could bring me, you know, along in that journey of transformation, that they could play that role. So I think that's what we ought to do. It's not easy, as you said earlier on in the first session, that churches that are more affirming, and the word affirming is also differently defined, you know, if we're affirming of individuals who are experiencing same-sex attraction, we get a lot of stick, you know. But let's look at Jesus. He got a lot of stick. But what did he do? You know, he lived life with people that he come to know, and he was very proactive in seeking them out, and he doesn't really care about how he is viewed by the religious community. So he related with individuals, and he lived life with them. So I think that's the model that I would go for, you know, not because of anything else, but because our Lord sacrificed himself as God to come here to relate to us. And I think that's what we ought to do as his disciples. Love God, love men.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Hera. I think there's so much to, I think by the end of this conversation, I think we've sort of shifted our focus to a larger picture of life and how we view ourselves as well. Because I think now we were focusing a lot on seeing the other who seems to be going through experiences that are foreign to us. But when we realize that we too have things to be fixed, or that we too have certain things that we are struggling, we are operating on the same platform. And I think from what I hear from you is that when we know that we are on the same level, when we are equals, when we are all equals, and that we are all in need of God, and that God is at work in our lives, I think that can help us and prevent us from having this condescending nature or viewpoint of the other person. And a condescending nature is like a one-up perspective of myself, you know, because I am one up, I don't have your issue. That gives me the right to tell you what to do. And that is untrue in the first place. That's not true. And that alienates my brother or my sister or my neighbor. And I think we've come to a point at the end of this conversation where we're saying, let's take a step back and look at ourselves in the mirror. As Jesus said, right? What did he say? Why do you look at the dust, the speck in your brother's eye when you have a log? And I think when we realize that we are all in equal need of God, we are able to be with someone better. And really, let's remember that they're human, just like us, with feelings, with emotions, with a personal space. And we shouldn't dehumanize them by labeling them or generalizing. And even when I'm using the term them, I'm already sort of othering. There's this sense of othering. And they are they should be a part of us. And there shouldn't be that sense of them or that other. And we need to make them us. You know, we need to bring them into our space, we need to step into our space, and we need to have those walls just fall as we just journey with them. And you mentioned as well about community. You know, we are all humans, we are all flawed, we have our own issues, and let's just journey together in that way. And another point as well from the second clip was that it is complex. For those who have not experienced it, it is a difficult journey, a dark journey sometimes, where...
Yes, and it's a journey they don't choose.
It's a journey they don't choose. Yeah. A journey people can't understand. Sometimes they feel that people don't want to understand. And so it is truly a delicate topic, and I think it's something that we shouldn't get into in a very, how do you put this, flippant way. You know, to have more respect for them. Any last words, Dr. Hera?
Oh, thank you so much for bringing this into conversation. It's a very sensitive topic, and I think it's always been in my heart, you know, to see the church be the church that Christ wants us to be. And you know, I know that as a church, our reputation is not good. You know, our reputation is of one that moralizes and judge, and I wonder why that is the case. You know, but looking at how we engage with individuals who are very different than us, who are individuals with different point of view, made me think that there is a validity in the way that, you know, non-believers do think and have that stereotypical view of church. So I think it's time that we represent Christ in the way that He has shown us. I think He has shown us how to do it. It's just that, you know, the incessant need to have that allegiance to God take over, and hence we make a lot of issues as a subject matter rather than dealing with a person that we see Jesus dealt with in His walk here on earth. He dealt with everyone that He came across as a person, not as a subject. Not as He didn't moralize the prostitutes that He meet, the people who are like tax collectors or individuals that are really not accepted in a society or the religious communities. He did not moralize them, although He has a right to. He's the only one who has a right to. He didn't do that. He didn't make them a subject matter. And I wonder, why is it that, you know, I observe in myself doing it too, that I tend to moralize, I tend to make, you know, the person into a subject matter. I think that is something that all of us as Christians need to think through and need to come before God and to ask God to help us represent Him better, and, you know, to turn around the stereotypical view of a judgmental community. If you were to ask, you know, many of our friends who are having same-sex attraction issues, will they come to church? I think a lot of them will say no. And that's something that actually, that's really deep in my heart. I want a church, I want to see a church that is supposed to do what Christ wants us to do. I want to see more of that. Not just for individuals who have same-sex attraction, you know, wrestling with that, but to any individual that is, you know, that God places in our life. So thank you, Debbie, for having me here.
Thank you, Dr. Hera, for joining us this morning. That's all for this month's episode on same-sex attraction. To be the first to see our clips, subscribe to us by clicking on the subscribe button below, and share your thoughts with us by commenting below as well, or if you have a question for Dr. Hera, send it over to hosts@safespace.my. See you next month for our next episode, and remember to like our Facebook page for updates on what's next. See you soon.